Nobody grows up wanting to haul junk. Nobody. It's not in any career guidance pamphlet. It doesn't come up at college fairs. When adults ask what you want to be, junk removal is not one of the options. So here's a question. How did two brothers from suburban Massachusetts, 14 and 16, end up building a junk removal business that does $3 million a year? And more than that, why does their story feel like it means something?
This is not a story about a breakthrough. It's a story about two people who looked at something nobody wanted to deal with and just kept showing up. By the time Kirk McKinney turned 22, he and his younger brother had 5 trucks, 25 employees, 2 service locations, and a business doing $3 million a year. It started with a used Ford pickup and a willingness to go to the dump. Kirk was a high school freshman during the lockdown. He started going to the local dump. Not for any reason. He just liked it. One afternoon, he found a pair of speakers someone had thrown out. It still worked. He brought them home, sold them on Facebook Marketplace, and went back. Over the following weeks, his bedroom slowly filled with things he'd pulled from the dump. Electronics, bikes, lamps that didn't match anything. He later described it as looking like a small-scale hoarder house. His parents described it differently. That's when he noticed it. People weren't just dropping things off. They were struggling to get there in the first place. Heavy furniture, broken appliances, entire lives worth of stuff that had been deferred and deferred until someone finally snapped and said, Today I am dealing with this.
Some of them would turn to Kirk and ask, "Hey, you want to make some money helping me get the rest out of the garage?" He was 16. He said yes. He called his brother Jacob, who was 14, and explained the plan. Jacob agreed. They pooled their money, $4,000, and bought a used 2006 Ford F-150. That's the whole origin story. No pivot, no eureka. Bored teenager at a dump, and a brother who said okay. Here's the thing about junk removal as a business. It looks, and I'm being honest here, it looks like something you do when you couldn't figure out anything else. It's physical. It's not scalable like software. You can't automate the couch. And yet, storage units in America, $40 billion industry. Not because people run out of space, because people can't face getting rid of things. The demand for help dealing with accumulated stuff is not going down. It is never going down. The businesses that feel too basic to be worth building are usually the ones that are actually worth building, because most people will not.
But there's a second layer here that I think is more interesting. At some point in the last decade, something shifted in how people felt about throwing things away. Not a dramatic shift, not a movement. Just people started asking where it was going. Is this going to the dump? Like straight to the dump? Kirk and Jacob answered honestly. They donate what they can, they resell what's worth reselling, they try to keep it out of the landfill. And that answer, which wasn't a marketing strategy, it was just the truth, changed the transaction for the customer. It wasn't just someone came and took my stuff. It was someone came and took my stuff and it went somewhere decent. People told their neighbors about that. Their neighbors called. Think about who the actual customer is here. Not their age group, their customer's age group. Homeowners in their 40s and 50s. People with basements full of 3-year-old intentions. People who found 2 teenagers via a neighborhood Facebook group and thought, actually, that sounds fine. Maybe better than fine. Because at least these kids would tell them where it went. It's a strange thing to build a reputation on. But it worked. Okay, the reality of this period. Kirk got detention multiple times for being late to school. Not because he was irresponsible, because the local dumps kept specific hours. Hours that started during first period, and someone had to empty the truck before the dump closed. So he'd pull into the school parking lot in a dump truck, Park it among the Civics and Jettas, walk into class 20 minutes late, sit in the back row, half asleep, still smelling faintly of someone else's garbage, running numbers in his head while the teacher talked about something he'd have to Google later. There's a specific detail from this period that I keep coming back to. At one point, they pulled a load that included someone's old mattress. Standard job. Take the mattress, take it to the transfer station, except the transfer station wouldn't take it that day. Some policy, some complication. So they drove home with a stranger's mattress strapped to the truck, parked it in the driveway, covered it with a tarp. It sat there for 2 days while they figured out what to do with it. Their dad walked past it every morning on the way to his car. Didn't say anything, just looked at it. For 2 years, the business ran out of their parents' driveway, stuff stacked under tarps every night, sold on Facebook Marketplace because they had nowhere to store it till morning, which meant photograph it in the dark, write the listing, answer messages at midnight from people offering $40 for something worth $200. Jacob said there were nights they slept 3 hours, and then went to school, and then had a job after school, and then did it again. I'm not saying this to make it sound heroic. I'm saying it because I want you to understand that for a long time, this was just an exhausting thing they were doing. Not a startup, not a grind. Just 2 tired teenagers with a driveway full of other people's things. And through all of it, the chaos, the detention, the dad walking past the mattress every morning, they never borrowed money. Every truck paid for in full. Every piece of equipment bought with money already made. That discipline, in hindsight, probably saved them. At the time, it was just the only option they had. March 2023, they signed a warehouse lease, $1,450 per month. Their parents were reportedly very relieved. The business makes money in 3 ways, and 2 of them are less obvious than they look. The first, the job itself. You call, they come, they take everything. You pay between $300 and $600. In 2025, they did 5,500 of those. That's where the $3 million comes from. The second thing is what happens after. Here's a specific example. A woman calls them to clear out her late mother's house. Standard cleanout job. Several rooms, a lot of furniture, a lot of stuff. In one of the bedrooms, a vintage record player. Still works. Original case. The kind of thing that would sell immediately. Under normal junk company operations, that goes in the truck, that goes to the transfer station, that's gone. With junk teens, it goes to the warehouse. Gets photographed, listed on Marketplace, sells for $200 to a college student in Boston 2 days later. The customer already paid to have it removed. Now, someone else paid to own it. That's not a system. That's just paying attention. But paying attention at scale adds up. The third thing is the social media. And I know that sounds like the least interesting part of this story, but here's what 400,000 followers actually means for a service business. A homeowner in the greater Boston area finds them on TikTok at 11 p.m. She watches Kirk explain how they price a job. Not a polished video, just him talking through it. She watches Jacob show where a donated couch actually went. The next morning, she calls. And she's not calling a stranger. She already knows how they operate. She's already decided she trusts them. The content closed the sale before the phone rang. For a service business, that's a real competitive advantage. Not glamorous, just it works. Cost side, labor is the biggest expense. 25 people, mostly teenagers and college students, part-time. Kirk and Jacob pay themselves modestly, enough for tuition and basic living costs. Everything else goes back into the trucks. Has, every year since the beginning. Every dollar that could have paid for a nicer life went into another truck instead. Year after year. That's the business model. Not the junk removal, the restraint. There are over 140 1-800-GOT-JUNK franchises in the United States. College Hunks, same basic concept, young workers, has 200 locations. This is not a market with no competition. So why are 400,000 people following two brothers from Norwood, Massachusetts, load furniture into a truck? I think it comes down to this. They're not performing anything. The content isn't branded. There's no persona. Kirk doesn't have a catchphrase. It's just, here's how they figured out the price on this job. Here's what happened when the transfer station wouldn't take the mattress. Here's the warehouse on a Tuesday afternoon. Here's Jacob talking about almost flunking a class while managing 25 employees. At one point, someone left a hot tub in their backyard for junk teens to remove. Standard request. They'd done it before. Except this particular hot tub was still partially filled with water. And it was winter, so it was partially filled with ice. They posted the video of them dealing with it. It did very well. Not because it was dramatic, because it was just genuinely absurd. Two college students in Massachusetts in February trying to move a frozen hot tub. That's not content strategy. That's just real life, recorded. People follow that because it's evidence. Evidence that these are actual people doing actual work, not a polished brand performing the idea of actual work. The local piece matters too. Two service areas, Eastern Massachusetts. Deep, not wide. In a tight geography, reputation is different. One good job can become 5 referrals in a week. A donated couch goes to a family at the school everyone went to, and someone mentions it. The town becomes invested. That's not replicable by a national franchise. You can't buy it, you can't franchise it. It only exists because these specific people are from this specific place. They didn't build a brand. They built a reputation in one place over years. That's slower, and it's much harder to copy. I want to be upfront about something. This is the part of these videos where it usually turns into a list. 5 lessons, 7 habits, the framework. I'm going to try not to do that. What I actually think is worth taking from this story? The industries that feel beneath most people tend to make consistent money. Not because they're secrets, because most people won't build them. The friction of physical work, of showing up, of not being able to do it remotely, that's the protection. It keeps the competition thinner than it should be. Kirk and Jacob tried everything in year 1. Landscaping, moving, junk removal, whatever the truck could carry. At some point, they picked one thing, the most competitive service in their area, because it was the one they could actually get good at. Specialization is uncomfortable because it feels like giving things up. But being the best junk removal company in a county is worth more than being an okay everything company in a region. The reinvestment is the part that looks obvious and isn't. Every year, there's a version of the choice where you spend the money instead. Something nicer, something that signals it's going well. They didn't. Year after year into trucks. That's not a finance insight. That's a character thing. And character things are harder than finance insights. Kirk considered dropping out of college 3 times. He stayed. Not for the degree. Because, and this is the part that surprised me, he said college was teaching him things the business couldn't, such as communication and social skills. How to be somewhere that didn't revolve around revenue. How to be with people who had completely different definitions of success. I think that's true. And I think it's easy to dismiss if you're only focused on the number. The things that actually made this work, specialization, reinvestment, staying local, being honest, none of them are secrets. They're just consistently hard to do. That's the whole thing. Sometimes I think about what this story would look like if Kirk had found something else at the dump that first day. A guitar, a camera, an old laptop. He probably would have found something to do with it. The dump would have just been a different starting point. But he found speakers. And then he noticed people struggling with their stuff. And he called his brother. And 4 years later, they're doing $3 million a year. Not because it was a genius idea, because they took it seriously when nobody else was.
They're aiming for 5 million this year. After college, more locations, maybe franchise, maybe something else. They don't fully know yet, which is fine. The trucks are paid for, the team is there, the reputation is built. They've got time.
Rich Explained is for these kinds of stories. The businesses that don't show up on TechCrunch. The ones that compound quietly in places nobody's particularly watching. If that's worth understanding, subscribe. And remember the F-150